I think we froze.
Okay, Madam Chair, we are now live. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. It is 1 minute after 1, and we will call the Climate Action Committee meeting to order. First item on our agenda is approving the agenda. So I know, Anne, you have some additions, and I have one as well. So, Anne, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. And the first thing that I wanted to mention, it's not an agenda item, but when I was going in to get the agenda package, I noticed that our committee on the home page is still referred to as the Climate Change Action Committee. And my memory was that we had changed it to the Climate Action Committee. And I think that coincides with the really wonderful website that or pages that Brittany added for the committee. But I think it'd be important for it to be congruent throughout. Now, so the agenda additions is, first of all, just an excellent job that Brittany did in very short order in setting up the pages. And for the agenda, so that's the thank you. But for the agenda, I wonder whether we should have some discussion about populating that website. What's the process? Because there is so much material out there that it could become overwhelming. So kind of having a bit of a good idea to take a look at the PCP in terms of whether that's something that could be done not by an expensive consultant, but possibly by committee or whoever. But I think just taking a look at those tools, which we haven't seen yet, might be a good idea. So those are my 3 additions. And I see John joining and Bob, so we're here.
Excellent. Thanks, Anne. I think I love our new telephone system, but all of my phones were all of a sudden going off, as well as my computer there a second ago. And I missed what the second item was. Can you just remind me?
Sure. The second item was that the funding for a contract employee has been approved at the budget decision. Some discussion around that person's qualifications and job description.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, and I would just like to add one item as well, and this was prompted by a discussion we had at our last council meeting, actually, that has to do with cutting down mature trees and then replacing those trees with other smaller trees. And it got me thinking about a couple of things. First of all, it made me realize that I have some knowledge gaps in terms of how that process might impact not only climate change, but things like erosion and soil health. And I thought I had actually seen in a documentary somewhere that trees take 10 years after they're planted to even start sequestering carbon. And until that time, they can actually do more damage to the environment, depending on the type of climate you live in, whether it's temperate or more tropical. So I wondered if maybe this is something that John could give us a sort of a quick overview on. I know that tree planting is a contentious, sort of controversial subject when it comes to climate change. My phone has not stopped ringing since we put that new system in for some reason. I don't get it. Anyway, so I just wondered, John, if you would be able to give us a quick overview and help us as councillors and as committee members understand that issue better as it pertains to climate change and just generally environmental issues. Is that something you can speak to today, John, or is that something you need more time?
Yeah. No, I'd be glad to speak to that. I've been working with the Neighborhoods North in the hospital and their tree planting up there. I helped write that proposal that now has been funded. And recently the hospital wants to expand their parking and cut down mature trees. So we were back dealing with that. And also in Owen Sound, the Climate Action Team Owen Sound, the city manager is proposing to plant 100 trees a year to sequester 100 tons, and the math just doesn't add up. So we're working with that one too. So it's a hot topic, really, and yeah, I'll be glad to speak to it.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So we have the agenda as it stands, and with Anne's 3 additions and mine, if we get to it without keeping people too long today on a holiday Friday, I wonder if I could get someone to move that the agenda be approved with those additions. Thank you, Luke. And just a show of hands, all those in favor? And it looks like that's passed. Thank you. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Feel free to declare that at any time if you see fit throughout the remainder of the meeting. Looking at item number 4.1. So these are the minutes of our Climate Action Committee from May 7th. And I would just ask that someone move to put that on the table. Thank you, Danuta. And is there any discussion around those minutes, any changes or revisions? Don't see any. All those in favor of adopting the minutes as they stand? Thank you, that passes. Doesn't look like we have delegations, correspondence, staff report. Nothing there, but was there any staff reports at this time? Probably not, okay. Nothing under public question period. It'll be very exciting when someone actually does submit a question for that particular agenda item. And then unfinished business. So this is over to you, Luke, if you could give us a bit of an update to the work that's been done recently on the work plan, if you don't mind.
Sure. So the work plan, a few adaptations. So we said we ultimately would like to make it public or more public. So you see there's a new logo, clean it up a little bit in terms of duplications, tiny little things, updated it with the latest milestone events with regards to the approval for the climate action plan and the staff person. The question, and we had some discussions about it internally, the question is a little bit, okay, so how are we going to use the work plan next? Because we will have a consultant or experts who probably will also come up with their own work plan, and we need to make sure that we can come up with a work plan, but what's the reality? So one of the suggestions has been to kind of more clearly delineate between mitigation and adaptation programs, and maybe focus less on, and that's a discussion for today or for maybe for next meeting, to what extent do we use the work plan as a way to organize our own thinking and make sure that the adaptation and the mitigation processes are synchronized. And I think it leads to a larger question about, do we want to do adaptation and mitigation at the same time? So PCP and BARC at the same time. Do we sequence them if we have limited resources? And then how will we track progress for both work streams at the same time? So it's a little bit, the question is, what do we want the work plan to do? And it's maybe not something we can discuss, we should discuss now, but maybe for one of the ideas would be to make it an agenda item for the next session, to say, once we have a little bit more clarity and we have a little bit more of an idea about when, for example, the staff person could be onboarded, at that point, once we have the resources and the implementation capacity, at that point, should we take a harder look at making sure that we cover off all the issues that need to be covered off. But there is a bit of a sequencing question that we were speaking about. And that's partly also, and I don't know how we want to go about it, but if we, our calculation or our, if we have 50,000 for this year and 20,000 goes to a BARC membership, that will leave 30,000 for 21. I don't know, I saw in the RFP that it's both adaptation and mitigation. The question is a little bit, what is the time frame of that RFP, and can we already commit to, for example, also the budget for next year? and I don't know how that works from a budgetary perspective. But if $30,000 for a consultant is gets you only so many days, and then the question and then the question is, what are priority actions? And that's also, I think, where Anne's question came from in terms of can we focus on those issues where a consultant is uniquely positioned to bring their expertise and to use those 20 or 30 days or however many days we get for that budget to focus on those areas, and then take a parallel approach and say maybe some of the baseline calculations could be done in-house. But that's something, and that of course will then influence how the work plan will actually be need to be updated. So that's by way of update. I mean, I'm just it's the work plan is really kind of more following what we have addressed, and we need to. So it's now being at crossroads. I think I will update it according to what we decide in this meeting and next meetings, and then take it from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I agree. It does feel like we're at a bit of a crossroads, and when we maybe I'll let Al speak to some of the timing around what you anticipate, Al, regarding that new staff member and how that plan might kind of intersect with the committee work plan that we have. It's looking great, Luke. There's a lot of work that's gone into this, and so thank you for that. But yeah, it is a matter of where do we go from here. So does anyone else have any comments, or Al, do you want to address it from a staffing perspective, perhaps?
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would say the following: there's really a convergence of things happening right now. I am in receipt of a draft climate change action plan from the county, which is scheduled to go forward sometime next month. It's a 92 or 98 page document that's pretty comprehensive. So looking at that in terms of how that's going to tie into us and provide us some direction as well. We know that council a couple of weeks ago approved our 2021 budget, which also included, as Anne was saying, an amount for us to proceed with an RFP and sort of get a consultant on board, but they also approved a contract resource for 18 months for us to get someone on board to help us sort of put all these puzzle pieces in place and make sure that we're all coordinated and we've got not only sort of an aggressive work plan, but one that's also achievable. There's no point in us putting something together that we know we're not going to be able to achieve. So we need to be able to put some aspirational goals in there as well, but we also need to identify things that we know we can get done within the limitations that we have. So really the way I'm envisioning this is the following. The first domino that needs to drop is we need to hire that contract resource to come in on board. We are finalizing that job description now. Once we have that, I'm happy to share it with the committee for your input in terms of what those minimum qualifications and what we're looking for in terms of expertise and experience to help us sort of put us on the right journey here and define that roadmap for us. I will tell you as well that I have shared the RFP, the draft RFP, with the CAOs across the county. And I will tell you that there has been a lot of support and a lot of interest in partnering with Georgian Bluffs in an attempt to not only sort of keep us all rolling in the same direction, because I think we all see that there's value in all of us moving together and doing those significant changes together versus individually. There's also the fiscal reality that perhaps we can get some savings from a consultant if instead of coming just to Georgian Bluffs, if we know that he can perhaps come and do West Grey and South Bruce and maybe Owen Sound all at the same time, maybe there's some synergies and some savings to be had as well. So we're putting that all together. I will tell you the interest that I've got from the CAOs has been very positive, that they are all very much interested. They were all, I'm going to tell you, they were all pretty impressed that Georgian Bluffs is actually, we're taking the lead on this in the lower tier municipalities. I think we're in the lead, and some of them are afraid that they're going to slow us down, but they certainly want to tag team with us and get on the same page with us. And so we're trying to coordinate how that would look like. so that we can get the synergies and the savings, but also move us forward without us sort of taking a pause, waiting for others to catch up. So we're working on that as well. And I'm hoping to have some updates for you in the next at our next committee meeting as well in terms of how that's panning out. So long story short, I agree, Luke. We're going to have multiple work plans here. You're going to have something from the consultant that's going to sort of define that roadmap. We're going to have our resource put together and meld not only the county work plan, our work plan, perhaps neighboring work plans, and put it in a definable sort of document that we can then follow for the next 5 to 10 years. Be able to have those checkpoints along the way and make sure that we are achieving what we're saying. I would love to have sort of a capital forecast as well in terms of what that looks like and what funding we would be required to have over the next 10 years, not only to do building retrofits, but sort of green our fleet, whatever those sort of high items that are going to be identified for us to do, because there's going to be a cost associated with that. So we have to define all of that. So long story short, I think the first domino is hire the resource, have that resource, he or she, then coordinate what that RFP is going to look like and with our neighboring municipalities, move that forward. Then work with that consultant to define our baseline, define what our work plan is going to be over the next 5 to 10 years with immediate increment steps, and then move forward with that. So I would be hesitant to say that we won't have someone in place over the summertime. I think we're going to be pretty aggressive. We've already given our HR manager the authority to post this in the various websites that we can do, not just our own website, but actually go out in some of the sort of the climate, sort of the engineering websites, the planning websites, the university websites, and we're hopeful that we can find someone who will come in. It's an 18-month contract, so I'm not sure the skill set that we're going to get, but I'm hopeful we'll get someone who's got a lot of experience in doing some of these action plans, who's got a real passion for this, and will help us guide us on this journey. So as soon as I get that draft job description in place, I will certainly forward it to the committee for your input, and then we will move forward in terms of posting that and trying to get someone with some interviews and get someone on board sooner rather than later.
Okay, so I think that helps sort of underscore what Luke had said too about our work plan, is that perhaps right now is not the time to do any major reworking of our work plan until we get that person on board and get a work plan for the municipality going. Other questions or comments in response to what Al has said or what Luke is looking for input for? Yeah, I wonder if this is somewhat segues into Anne's agenda item regarding the qualities of, or the qualifications rather, of that individual that's being hired. Do you want to carry on with that conversation now, or do you want me to come back to it later in the agenda in unfinished business or new business? How do you feel about that, Anne? Is now the time, or do you want to come back to that?
I feel like it's an appropriate time to do that now. And I do wonder whether it would be useful if I was an HR person designing a job description. I think having some upfront input from this committee in terms of some of the skill base would not be a bad idea, rather than write it all and then come back to us and say, oh, but what if? So in terms of sequence, I think now would be good.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, well, let's move over sort of to that that stream then. I mean, I don't know what qualifications. I'm sure that John and others on the committee do know, but I would it's my sense that an individual who's hired would have to have a pretty strong science background in environmental and climate change science. But I wonder if, John, do you have some remarks? I know you sent the email out regarding the, I think it was a graduate level student. Is that the level we're kind of aiming for, would you think, or what are your suggestions about that position?
Well, my experience comes from the Niagara Adapt program. And we know down there of those 7 municipalities, the ones that have been successful have had a coordinator, and the ones that are not successful have not. So it's a key position. And I know for both the town of Lincoln and the town of Pelham that they hired a person out of the Brock Sustainability Master's program. That's a master's in sustainability. And so these people, come in at those salary levels, and they come in knowing about climate change. So it's not something you have to explain to them. But more importantly, they know what it is to build a sustainable community and a resilient community. And if you're building a sustainable and resilient community, you're fundamentally dealing with climate change. So that's been my experience. Now, I had the job description for the town of Pelham, and I can't find it in the catacombs of my computer files. So, but I did. Did I not email that to the committee? Okay, so we've all had a look at that as terms of how the town of Pelham had wrote that. I don't have the Lincoln one yet. I'm still trying to get it, but I'm sure. Well, Brittany could probably get it easier than me, but I'm sure it reads very much the same because they hired individuals with pretty much the same background.
Thank you. Other comments regarding the qualifications for that position? Oh, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'm just looking back at the April 1st meeting for the county, and they were looking there at a climate change coordinator position and have a whole comparison as to what various municipalities are paying, and there's what kind of contract they gave, that type of thing, plus the list of what some of those requirements are. So that might be a good document to review and bring forward just to see what the county is doing there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have a draft job description as part of that. So that might give some good information there as to what we could be looking forward looking for as well.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure Al has that same document. Yep, perfect. Danuta.
I just thought I'd mention it if we're looking for a lot more from somebody because we're planning to do the adaptation and mitigation at the same time, whereas Grey County is doing only the adaptation or mitigation program with the PCP. So I don't know if that makes a big difference to the role. I think it would. I did look at their job description the other day on that, and they're looking for someone with a graduate degree in a variety of science-based fields.
So that's good to know. That's consistent with what John was mentioning as well. Does it matter, do you think, if the individual has experience in climate action plans at a more rural, small community level as opposed to a municipality with a whole different look and feel, the demographics being different, or are the concepts fairly similar? John, do you have an answer to that question, or anyone else?
Like if you write it for someone coming out of an environmental program, you know they're going to have the background in the climate change things. What the job description for Pelham said in terms of experience, if I recall, was sort of experience not just in like climate action and sustainability, but also working with people and working with different groups and the communication skills and things like that. So I think in that case they were looking for 2 years of experience. I think that's important, and I think when you ask for something like that, you either get someone that's maybe got a bachelor level degree, but they actually have those 2 years work experience. I know that the original coordinator hired for, oh my goodness, one of those townships, she was really good and making some progress. She was headhunted and taken off to a bigger municipality. So these people are in demand. So you get someone with experience, but anyone coming out of that master's program would typically meet these levels of experience that we're looking for, because they, a lot of the sustainability, you're out working in the community, especially when they're involved with an AgriAdapt. They've been doing surveys, they've been interviewing people, putting together profiles of important issues and things like that. So I think that kind of covers the experience part, but it doesn't mean they actually have to have worked on this.
Yeah, no, I was hoping you would touch on that, because graduate level typically does mean field experience as well. It's not just theoretical classroom learning. So yeah, thanks for that point. Anne, your hand is up.
Yes, actually, John kind of covered what I was going to say. I think the communication skills are really, really an important balance to the climate knowledge and science knowledge. You need both.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Any other comments or feedback for Al to take back to HR for that document? Luke?
Yeah, I think you asked a good question about how would that position look differently for a rural area as opposed to an urban area. And I do think that we're dealing with the public, that, you know, there's still healthy skepticism in our area, very agricultural based. And I think it would be really important to have these, how do you deal with resistance? How do you actually make a case for people to you know, how do you deal with resistance and pushback? Because I don't think we're having reached that critical mass where people say, okay, bring it on, let's go for it. I think there's a lot of outreach that needs to be done. So interpersonal people skills and project management, and, you know, being a self-starter, I think is just absolutely critical. There's a great staff to work with in the municipality, great council, but even amongst it, how do you deal with some of the councillors that are still a bit on the fence? I think these are just real realities that we have to deal with. And I think if there's anybody that has a bit of experience to say, yeah, this is I think the default position has to be, how do you deal with pushback? And if you get support, I think at this point is the exception. But for now, I think dealing with pushback and making the arguments to various audiences, to me, would be absolutely critical for this position. And that's not easy. That's a specific skill. So that's that's, I think, important for this role.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder if those communication skills are built into the program itself as well. Not to say that it comes naturally to everyone, but I would be surprised if that wasn't part of their educational requirements as well. Yeah, all good points. Al, does that give you enough to go on for that position? Is that helpful at all?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, absolutely. It's very helpful. I've taken notes. I'm going to insert them into our draft job description. I'm going to be completely honest. As you can expect, we're not drafting this from scratch. We're going to be plagiarizing a lot of other existing job descriptions that are out there, and we will mix and match, and then I will have a draft for this committee to review and via email in the coming days, and then we'll take it from there.
Excellent. For those of you more in the know than I on this committee, do you think this is something that can be done to a certain extent, at least remotely? I'm just wondering about increasing our reach to folks who have the right qualifications. And I mean, I know we want them in our community, getting a feel for it, visiting the area, understanding it, but it would seem to me that there would be some flexibility in terms of a work from home kind of philosophy. What are your thoughts on that? Sue?
Thank you. The idea that just popped into my head may sound a little bizarre, but when we hire somebody to work remotely from home, how do we know they're not working for somebody else and they're picking up 2 paychecks for doing the same job? How do we know they're only working for Georgian Bluffs? And maybe that's not a concern, but that's just the thought that popped into my head. So
yeah, no, it's a fair point. I guess it could be said that they could be right here in our office and still doing 2 jobs as well. But I think the key is having deliverables and timelines, like KPIs, so that we can check in and make sure that they're meeting their objectives along the way. And I'm quite sure that would be part of the plan, the work plan. Anne, over to you.
I think a combination of remote, but also feet on the ground in Georgian Bluffs would be important, because we've talked about how important the community engagement part is, and it's really difficult to establish those relationships that are going to be required if you're not here.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
But on the other hand, to expect somebody to move for an 18-month contract is a bit of a challenge. So I think we need to be flexible in terms of how the job looks.
I agree. Yeah, for sure. Any other comments to add in regards to that position? So Al, just to clarify, that position is only climate change, right? It's not folded in with economic development, or that's a standalone contract.
Through Madam Chair, yes, absolutely, standalone 18-month contract. But I do agree with the thought and the sentiment that with the work from anywhere policy that we're implementing at the township, we'll be able to cast a wider net. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get some qualified people that can work remotely, with the proviso understanding that they're not going to be able to do this entirely remotely. They're going to have to be in the community. They're going to have to walk. They're going to have to talk to people. They're going to have to understand the assets that we have and the challenges that we have that are unique to Georgian Bluffs. And the only way you do that is by becoming part of that community a couple of days a week, 1 day a week, or maybe a week at a time, and then a week from home, whatever that looks like. And we'll determine that as through the interview process, but that will be certainly a requirement.
Excellent. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. We have ratepayers. Most of our ratepayers are very, very proud of our region and are anxious to show off what we have to offer. You know, I was talking to someone recently who was doing physician recruitment for their area, and it's a neighboring municipality that's very rural, very much agriculture and farming, and they set up a whole tour of new docks, visiting the barns and milking the cows and feeding the goats. And these doctors were completely sold and could hardly wait to move to this little rural town to join the team. So yeah, I think we shouldn't sell ourselves short either in introducing our amazing municipality to these folks. And maybe, who knows, maybe they'll come to stay and find more work here. So yeah. Okay, anything else to add on that, John, that position?
Yeah, just one quick question, and then I'll take my hand down when I. Has there been any discussion about making that, considering after 18 months that might flip into a permanent position? If there was, I've missed it.
Thank you. I'll let Al address that one.
I really don't know until we go further down this path. I'd be hesitant to make a commitment or a recommendation at this point in time. I think depending on the success that we have, depending on the workload that's there, I can confirm for sure that this is a full-time job to get this off the ground and get going for a period of time. I don't know whether the body of work that will require someone full-time going forward or not, but I'm hesitant to even take a guess right now until we get further down this path and see exactly the workload and what success we're having, and then take it from there. But as I would say to anyone, including council, is if the workload is there and we can justify it and we can demonstrate that there's value to our ratepayers, then we can certainly explore that and see if there's some room for council to consider that in future budgets. But right now, what we have is an 18-month contract, and we're going to get as much as we can out of those 18 months, and then we're going to take it from there.
Perfect.
Okay, well, just a heads up. Based on a research study that was done of I think 16 or 20 communities in Ontario that have followed the PCP, they found that the most difficult step was the implementation step. And so having someone to then take the plan and start to implement it was critical. And then they outlined, and I have shared this information with the committee, they outlined, the key obstacles to actually getting your plan implemented. So I completely understand it's too early to really say, but just a heads up coming down the line that if we get someone that's good, when we get to that stage of, we've got the plan, now we want to put it in place, we might really want to look to that person. So that's just my comment on that.
Thanks, John. And that's a really important comment. I think I don't know how many times I've heard since joining council how we pay good money to develop these amazing plans. And then the plan gets put on a shelf and the implementation just doesn't happen. So your point is well taken. And I think it would do